This is the fourth episode of my story. And in the first three episodes, talk about depression, talk about suppressed emotions, talk about anger. Today I want to talk about substances, and more specifically substance abuse, and identifying with substance abuse as a piece of my core identity at, in the stage of life that these stories are happening in. And, in high school, I got into partying, I got into drinking, I got into smoking pot and some harder things. And I started to take on as part of my identity that I was someone who partied. That was something that I identified with and wanted to be. I chose that. And part of the reason that I enjoyed partying and using these substances was because they allowed me to break past the barriers that I'd put up for myself on being myself and let a different version of myself out. And that version of myself was, to my eyes at the time, more fun, more energetic, funnier, and the life of the party, as opposed to my sober self, an introverted, quiet, just different person. And as I created this identity in my teens and carried it with me into the 20s, it became more and more unhealthy. And I was never a drinker all the time. Rather, I was a sometimes drinker of all the drinks. And I was a smoker of pot all the time. And the alcohol would let me come out and play. And then the pot would help me hide during the day and never let myself truly be me. And as I was doing the self-work that I've been talking about in these stories, I started to realize that I had a problem, not in the traditional sense of addiction so much, at least not with the alcohol, but more in the sense that because I didn't like who I was, and this person that came out with the alcohol was something that I didn't identify with most of the time, but I kind of liked in a way, that I gravitated towards it more frequently. And that was not something that was going to serve me. At that stage in my life, I wanted to pursue becoming a professional mountain biker. That was another piece of my identity that I really was working towards and ended up, achieving in some ways. Which is a different story, not as important. But this identity as a partier was always a piece of that as well. And the people that I hung around, the environments that I put myself in, they weren't healthy environments and they weren't healthy relationships. And I started to realize that. And as I realized that, I started to sequester myself and to isolate. And at the time, that's what I needed to do. Because I didn't know how to be me around the people that I was with. And I didn't know the people yet who wanted me to be me. They wanted me, the people that I'm talking about here, wanted me to be the partier, wanted me to be the smoker. That was the Matt that they knew. And so I isolated, and I started doing a lot more self-reflection, and I stopped drinking. but I kept smoking because I still couldn't figure out how to be me, and didn't feel like some piece of myself didn't feel like me was worthy. And so through the use of marijuana, I was able to avoid showing people me because I was stoned. I was never fully me. I was suppressing me. I was suppressing my curiosity. I was suppressing my intellect. All of it. And I realized, as I was doing my self-reflection, I realized what I was doing. I realized I was smoking to hide. And realizing that for me was one of the first steps towards being able to kick the habit. But realizing it's one thing. Coming out of hiding is a whole different thing. And for me, like, what ended up being kind of finally being the catalyst that allowed me to really do that was in meeting my wife. And I think it's important to note here that I definitely don't believe that you should find someone that you kick the habit for. At least that wouldn't have worked for me, and that's not what happened. What happened was that I met this woman who I'm now married to and have a young daughter with. And I knew that I wanted to be with her. Almost, and not even almost, I knew right away. Like, the whole love at first sight thing, like, there was some of that. And as I became aware of that and got to know her, I realized that my pothead self intellectually couldn't keep up with her. She was smart, much smarter than the people that I was hanging out with on a regular basis, and I knew that I could keep up with her if I wasn't stoned. And so I stopped smoking because I wanted to be with her much more than I wanted to be smoking. And it's not something that she ever asked me to do. And I think that's important. You can't stop that kind of a habit for anyone else. It has to be for you. Otherwise there's resentment and there's the kind of nagging. It has to be a personal decision. And, stopping smoking pot literally opened up doorways for me. Like, my whole life has completely turned around since that point. And all the self-reflective work that I've talked about thus far helped me to get to the point where that was something that I could do. And I also want to note here that I don't believe that everyone has to be sober. And I don't believe that pot is a problem for everybody. And I don't believe that alcohol is a problem for everybody. What I do believe is that if you're using these substances, as I was, to escape myself or to become someone else because you don't like the person that you think you are, and it's time to look a little bit deeper. And for me, that deeper reflection actually took me back into childhood. I've talked a lot about already in these stories the going back and looking at old memories and old baggage that had popped up. And what happened is I was going through this phase where I was coming to the realization that I needed to stop smoking and actually doing it, that I went back into this innocent childhood in which I hadn't needed pot to hide because I didn't feel like I needed to hide. It was okay for me to be curious. It was okay for me to be intelligent but also ask questions. And it was okay for me to be me, back when I didn't know that there was anything else other than me to be. And so coming back to that in my mid-20s and realizing that that same little boy was still deep inside me and just needed to come out and play. And that letting that little boy out allowed me to really get back in touch with who I am. And that has made all the difference. So my ask to anybody watching this is to look at what you're doing in your life and to look at what you're doing that maybe you don't feel like is serving you. And it could be substances, it could be something else, it could be thought forms. And look at what those things are doing for you. And if they are suppressing an aspect of yourself, look at that aspect and ask yourself, why does it need to be suppressed? What is it about this that's so bad? And then maybe try and change it if you want to. And if you or anyone else that you know is battling with substance abuse issues, please feel free to reach out to me. It's something that I've had a lot of experience with personally and with friends and family. And I'm more than happy to talk to anybody about it. So as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please share it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And remember, I'm sharing these videos for me because I know that my experiences have value for me. And if you find value in them too, I'm glad. And that makes me happy. Because if we both find value in them and we both choose to learn the lessons from them, then the world gets to be a better place for me and for you. There's more coming soon. Thanks for watching.